Good evening and welcome to The Buck Stops Here. The secrecy around the new education policy drafted by a committee headed by the former Cabinet Secretary TSR Subramaniam is finally over. Now that it's been released without the ministry doing so, Smriti Irani has opened it up to suggestions from the public at large, all of us. But what about it was so problematic that it wasn't made public in the first place? The suggestions include several aspects the HRD minister has already spoken in favour of: restricting political activity on university campuses and revisiting admissions of students who've been enrolled for several years, for example. But the panel and the minister have some differences on issues like the three-language formula for schools and, interestingly, the minister's use of the word tolerance instead of acceptance for Indian diversity as something to be taught to children. Will this new policy be implemented? Will its recommendations solve a major educational crisis in the country? Or will they again become the subject of a greater political battle?
Can these pictures be a thing of the past? A government-appointed panel looking at changing the education system hopes to overhaul the exam system that goes beyond judging students based only on the results of board exams. It also suggests that Class 10 board exams in maths and science should be in two levels, where students have the option to choose between a basic and higher level, depending on the stream they want to pursue after school.
It doesn't force a student to give too much attention to maths and science if they've made up their minds that that's not what they want to pursue in the future.
In the moment, I would think that it's a good option. I'll take the easier maths paper. But then later, I'd struggle with if I wanted to change streams, if I wanted to go to science.
The committee headed by former Cabinet Secretary TSR Subramanian also suggests politics on campus should be curbed. Caste and religious-based groups on campus should be de-recognized, and the number of years students spend on campus should be limited.
Organizations which are fighting against caste and communalism, they should not be targeted, which was clearly visible in the case of University of Hyderabad.
The report also suggests a no detention policy till class 5 and a new legislation for regulating higher education. But this is where it's likely to be contentious, as it doesn't agree with the government's three-language formula and also insists on using the word acceptance of Indian diversity in place of tolerance that was used by the ministry.
It talks a lot about exam reform, which is crucial. We haven't had enough of exam reform. But I think when they start talking the nitty-gritties of learning, for instance, I think they're using a regressive language, especially with reference to the no detention policy. Because if learning is child-centered and it's allowing children to think for themselves, then you don't automatically label children as slow learners or weak.
The Union HRD Ministry will be consulting all states before it can come up with a national education policy, something that was last done more than 3 decades ago. In New Delhi with camera person Shalik Ram, Ketki Angre for NDTV.
Well, joining us in the studio to talk about his panel's recommendations is the former Cabinet Secretary TSR Subramaniam. Sir, thanks very much for being in the studio. I think the first question, and I'm sure you've been asked this plenty, is really why did its becoming public become such a matter of controversy? I mean, why did it have to come to this?
Actually, it's non-issue. I think probably more attention has been given to this aspect than required. Essentially, this is not a secret document. This is an open exercise from the ministry side, from the assignment to the committee. In fact, don't forget that the Honorable Minister started the entire exercise last year with a huge public consultation all over India, with tremendous results of reaching out to the people. That was the material given to us. We met about 500-600 experts also, spent half an hour nearly with each.
Right.
And therefore, there is nothing confidential or secret about it. I think now that the report is public, the real issue is what the recommendations are. You talked of crisis.
Right.
It's important whether it will be solved or not. It is important. It must be solved.
Right. Before we get to that, just as a follow-up, a very quick follow-up to this, while you say it's a non-issue and maybe it's been blown out of proportion, and let's shift focus right now, the fact is that you did say that if the ministry did not make it public, you would do it yourselves. And secondly, Smriti Irani has in May also talked about how she doesn't want this new education policy to be the legacy of one individual. Do you think that was a comment at you?
This is water off a duck's back. I'm not bothered about it. It's not important now. For me, what is important is the country needs a new policy. The ministry is determined to give a policy. We have given raw material which needs to be converted. For me, I am not at all worried about that. The key point is 30% of the population is in daily touch with the education sector in its daily activities. It is too important for a subject to be settled in one room or in one building. It is a national issue, and hopefully we will get good answers now. I have now treated
so it's
that.
not personal between you and the minister. That's how it seems to have come across.
I have great admiration for the minister. She started the process, and the credit should go if it's successful. In fact, now she will be tested whether she brings out a new good policy or not, and that's the key issue rather than the past.
So coming to the policy itself, there are areas of divergence. In fact, one of the most interesting things that that has emerged since this report, since your recommendations were made public, was this use of the language, you know, the word of tolerance, where you say it should be acceptance. That speaks of a mindset of some kind. Why did you pick up on that?
You spoke of why we wanted it in public space. The 3 points mentioned are not correct factually. They are not issues at all, either with me or with the ministry. Firstly, the issue of the word tolerance. I don't think the minister, I don't recall she spoke. We said the first draft that we prepared within the committee used the word tolerance. As we went along, we saw how diverse India was, how it is important to everybody to work together. We upgraded it to acceptance. It has nothing to do with the minister, number one. I want to clarify it. It is no. The second.
But why would a word like tolerance be used in the first place then?
After all, a draft evolves there.
Right.
So somebody had said that we should accept everything with great tolerance. This was the thought, which is not a bad thought.
Right.
We upgraded that thought to acceptance. I think it has been wrongly portrayed.
Okay.
It is not an issue. The other is the 3-language issue. Look, I don't think ministry or the minister or I or anybody else has given a verdict on 3-language formula. The 3-language formula has been here since 1968. Partly it is done, partly it is followed, partly it is not followed, and therefore it is a kind of an ideal which has not been done, and therefore it is wrong to say that we think it is correct, it is not correct, etc.
Okay.
So this is too sensitive a matter to come to a kind of Boolean conclusion, hit or miss, 0 or 1. It is.
Well, in that you've also made a suggestion that if Sanskrit is to be included, it should be done in a way that focuses less on the grammar than the use of the language. I mean, these are legitimate things.
Not only Sanskrit. All
Any
language coaching historically has been based on grammar, etc. Even after 3 to 5 years, a child is not very happy. So we should now have. We are not saying exclusively exclude grammar. We say conversational teaching of all languages, not just Sanskrit. Whichever language is taught should be the. There are no new systems all over the world in teaching languages. In India, we are not adopting them. Idea was to bring them to India to make, because the child can learn very fast with applications. Go to applications rather than the grammar.
Right, sir. So coming back to the recommendations, grammar, applications, spoken language as opposed to written or learnt language through textbooks. These are valid suggestions, and I think any educational reform policy would look at issues like this. We have a greater crisis in the country. We have a situation where we saw in Bihar, you had toppers of the exams. The subjects that they've topped in, they don't have subject area knowledge. We have a situation where we boast internationally about our young population with high degrees, high qualifications, but no jobs. So one aspect is that this policy is geared towards finding employment. That's a target that this government wants to reach.
It is a national imperative need.
But here you need to first create primary education systems that are going to. Your own report talks about 4 out of 10 class 1 children who've dropped out before finishing class 7, and the gross enrollment ratio for higher education is 23.6%. That's extremely low.
No, not the last one. See, look, I think we should have a discussion. The spirit of this policy has been, we had excellent policies in 86. Before that 68, but hardly any of it has been implemented in the last 65 years. That is the starting point. We now come with, actually the picture is much grimmer than most Indians
well, that's evident in instances like we saw.
It is only not there. We look at figure after figure. You look at ASAR's report, you look at NCERT report, Gunotsav report. So, this is the starting point for us. We say, therefore, the focus of this policy, the earlier policy brought literacy from 12% to 74%. Earlier, RTE has brought it nearly 100% enrollment with huge dropout. Therefore, the new focus we have is twofold. One, quality right through. In fact, in higher education, we have said that a ruthless way of weeding out degree shops should be done, and we talked about it chapter and verse. The other key thread in that entire report is legally inclusion is there, legally everybody is there, but in actual fact, it is the system is heavily loaded.
Okay,
against
so we don't have a lot of time. So I want to ask you two very important questions that come to my mind. The one is, we're talking about changing education policy, we're talking about reform in the education system, and yet there have been budget cuts as far as education is concerned. What does your panel say, and is the government open to revising that policy of budget cuts?
That government has to answer. Something like EU, which is much higher education level average than in India, and with much higher per capita income than India, most countries do 6.5 to 7% of GDP. We are doing 3.5 to 4% of GDP. So, a country which is educationally much weaker, with a large number of
is doing less,
and we are doing half of that. So, the point is imperative. In other words, previous governments in 70 years have not understood that this is a national building task.
Right.
It is not a question of educating A or B. The nation has to be educated.
Also, sir, and I think that's where we're going to take off to our debate as well tonight. I mean, you've talked about restricting political activity on higher education campuses, universities, enrollment of students, caste and religious based organizations on campuses. There is another view that says campuses, university, higher education campuses that are teaching social sciences and liberal arts particularly, are spaces for various political views, various thoughts, and that's where most of the world's political leaders have emerged from, is from a strong campus politics base. Why is your panel talking about restricting this?
I would like you to read the pages rather than take a summary.
Yeah.
We have not given any recipe or solutions. We have made a general statement. There is the vast majority of students, we assume 80 to 90%, who invest 2 to 3 to 5 years of their lives, the whole life earnings, families, etc. Their priority is to learn, use that time in their own career. On the other, Article 19 demands that freedom of association, freedom of ideas should be encouraged.
Right.
Today, the entire publicity, we are not worrying whether half a year is lost, 3 months of lost examination are postponed, which means it affects crores of people all over. All we have now suggested is there should be a debate in the country where the silent majority student and their parents are also consulted, along with the vocal political and other interests. Secondly, the university is a temple of learning. It should not be exclusively be a cockpit for different social problems, etc. Though they get reflected there, the primary purpose of the university is education. So, all we are now saying is, legally we have taken the opinion that Article 19 will permit of restrictions legally. All we have said is there should be a balance the two factors, a national debate, like in US, for example, this election year. Have you ever heard even Gore versus Bush period, the most contentious election, 1 hour of exams, 1 hour of university time lost anywhere in US? I lost 1.5 years in my career. And therefore, we have to balance the two interests. That's what we are saying. We are not saying do this or do that.
But that balance is a very tricky situation in the political climate that we are in right now.
Every political decision is tricky.
Yeah.
And the whole art of balancing is to ensure that the difficult solutions are solved in a manner which everybody is happy with.